Assalamu alaikum. مساء الخير على الجميع. And welcome to our today's workshop. It's going to be about writing report in 10 steps, presented by Mr. Ridwaan Levy. So this is the first workshop in our technical writing series. So we'll have 3 more workshops, inshallah, in the coming weeks. So thank you, Mr. Ridwaan, and thank you all for attending this workshop. So the brother Ridwaan, the floor is yours. You may start.
Thank you very much, Dr. Basim. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. And I would like to welcome everybody to our first workshop in the technical series. And we will start off today, this evening, with a report writing. And just to make sure what it is about, there are many different types of reports, as we know, in the business world, in our lives, in our academic lives. We need to write a report at some stage. Sometimes we will be required to do a report as a research project or a proposal. So there are many different types, like business reports, scientific reports, and research reports. But the basic steps for writing them are, it's all the same. So today, it generally involves presenting investigation and analysis of information or an issue, recommending actions, and making proposals. In any field in life, any field of study or a career that you are in or that you are going to be in, there's going to be some form of report to be written, analysis of information or an issue, an investigation, recommending actions, and of course, making proposals. So it is good to know the steps of report writing. So we will start off there. And in this workshop today, we will look at the 10 steps of report writing. I hope everybody can see the slides clearly and you can hear me okay. Is everything okay that side?
Yes, doctor, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Right, so let's kick off with step 1 of the 10 steps. And step 1, we decide on the terms of reference. To decide on the terms of reference for your report, read the instructions and information you've been given about the report and think about the purpose of the report. For example, what is it about? What exactly is needed? Why is it needed? When do I need to do the report? Who is it for? Or who is it aimed at? Remember, our audience is important, right? It's usually for a director or a manager or a supervisor when we do a research proposal. And this will help us to draft our terms of reference. Are you clear on that so far? Right, so we need to look at the terms of reference. What is it about? What exactly is needed? Why is it needed? Why do I need to do it? Who is it for? My audience, of course, and all of this will help with the terms of reference. Okay, so the terms of reference include the following in your term of reference. For example, start by writing the purpose of this report is, or I can use another wording, the scope of this report is, right? So in your terms of reference, we should provide an overview of the most important guidelines that we were given for writing that particular report, whichever report it is that we are going to do. Then step 2, we decide on the procedure. And of course, this means planning our investigation or research and how you'll write the report. Does anybody have an example of what kind of reports you will write in your job, in your career, or in your field of study? Has anybody been required to write a report? Yeah, a report about a book report also. It's slightly different than a technical report or a business report. But a book report is a very common thing that we are required to report on. And of course, a journal sometimes, any kind of reading material. Then we have people working in the medical field. They have to write reports about incidents. Managers have to write reports all the time about incidents happening, or the, what do you call that person that works in the company, the safety officer or health and safety officer at any institution or company have to write reports all the time. Policemen have to write reports also. And of course, in every company, we have different policies and procedures, right? Yes, Abdurrahman, very good engineering reports, safety report, and so on. So step 2, to plan it, decide on our procedure. When we do that, we have to ask ourselves, what information do I need? Do I need to do any background reading? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on the report. What articles or documents do I need? Do I need to contact the library for assistance? Do I need to interview or observe people? Do I have to record data? Sometimes that's important. How will I go about all of this, right? So we need to get these things in order. Ask yourselves these questions before you start. So the step 3 would be to find the information, right? So the next step is to find the information you need for your report. In order to do this, we may need to read written material, observe people or activities, and talk to people. Sometimes it's required to do an interview, or maybe more than one interview, and make sure the information we find is relevant and appropriate. And lastly, check the assessment requirements and guidelines and the marking schedule to make sure that we are on the right track. This, of course, this last point here, bullet point, is specifically for students, postgrad students, or students who write a term paper or a research proposal or their thesis. So check the assessment requirements and guidelines and the marking schedule to make sure you're on the right track. And of course, when it comes to the last bullet point, at every university in the world, there is a writing center, the same like we have here, the AWC, and there are people to guide you through the process. Are you clear on that? Any questions about that or any concerns that you might have? Okay, so step 4 is we decide on the structure of the report. It generally have a similar structure, right? The reports, different types of reports have a similar structure, but some details may differ. How they differ usually depends on the type of report, if it is a research report, a lab report, a business report, or investigative report, and so on. And of course, we have to decide on how formal the report has to be and the length of the report as well. Some reports will be much longer, depends on what you are reporting or what your recommendations are or what findings that you have. So, and of course, it's always better to write it in the most formal language. We'll come to that part just now. So it depends on the type of report. The structure depends on the type of report, and we can include a title page, just a cover page actually, an executive summary, which gives us a summary of what the report is going to be about. And then a list of contents, what will be in the report, an introduction, terms of reference, the procedure, how we go about our findings, what we found, that is our procedure. And of course, findings, what did we find? And what was our final findings? And then conclusions. For example, I interviewed people and I discovered that they are not happy with this and that, and that the conclusion would be people are not happy. That's a conclusion. Recommendations, you recommend to the person who asked for the report, or the audience of the report, which is top structure, usually management or a higher authority, you recommend what can be done. And then, of course, you include your references or your bibliography. We'll come to that part just now. When we use references, we make sure that we refer to the information or the sources where we got our information from, right? Appendices, single appendix, plural appendices, include stuff that we can add into the document at the back, like an accident report or pictures or graphs that we couldn't put in. And we will look, yes.
معلومه صح معلش جماعه اليوم نبي نشتغل تسليك قلنا لكم اليوم يوم طبطبه حلو اليوم يوم طبطبه
Okay, so everybody's muted. Okay, so appendices is any additional information that we need to add in there, pictures, graphs, and something like that. The sections of report have headings and subheadings and are usually numbered. So step 5, we draft the report, the first part of your report. In step 5, we draft the first part. How do we do that? Once we have our structure, we write down the headings and start to fill it in with the information we have gathered so far. So by this time, we should be able to draft terms of reference, procedure, and findings, and start to work on what will go in the report's appendix. And then under findings, we have the result of the reading, observations, interviews, and investigation. And that, of course, forms the basis of our report. So it depends on the type of report that we are writing. We would also include photos, tables or graphs, and to make our report more readable or easier to follow. In the appendices, while we're writing the draft, decide on what information will go in the appendix. So these are used for information that's too long to include in the body of the report. Anything extra that might be too long to include in the main body of the report, we put it in the appendices. Supplementary work supplements or complements the information in the report. For example, brochures, spreadsheets, maybe an Excel graph, or large tables to be more descriptive. Sometimes we have to write something, or sometimes we want to illustrate a point, or we want to show information about a particular process, and then we will add a spreadsheet or a graph just to show the reader what we are trying to show in the report. Are you okay with that? Are you clear so far? All right, so step 6, we analyze our findings and we draw conclusions. When we analyze findings and draw conclusions, we use a simple logical thought, right? We look at the page or we read a book and we think, what is this about? I'm just using a random example here. Or maybe we watch a movie, right? What do we find? What did we like? What did we not like? What was it about? And then we draw conclusions. What message did we get from that book or that movie? You understand the example that I'm using here? I'm just using a common everyday example. The same thing goes with our report writing. It might sound very technical and it might sound like it's difficult to do, but think of one thing and always remember that: use simple, logical, and concise language. Right. So step 6, the conclusion is where we analyze our findings and we interpret what we have found. To do this, we read through the findings. So when you read through the findings, ask yourself a question. What have I found? What's significant or important about my findings? What do my findings suggest? Right? So when we look at findings, for example, I'm going to write a report about an accident. What have I found? I found somebody injured. I found somebody was mistakenly knocked over somebody, anything, it could be anything, right? What is significant? There was something obstruction. There was some obstruction in the way. A traffic light did not work, right? That is just a normal accident report. What about a technical report in a medical report or an engineering report, right? So what's significant about it? The important things that stands out in my findings. Sometimes we look at something and we see that something is not working. But what is important about that is there's a reason why, or something happened because that thing happens, right? And what does it suggest? What do my findings suggest? It suggests that I take action, right? So I take action to fix the problem. And that would be my suggestion. For example, your conclusion may describe the information you collected, why the situation occurred, what this means for the organization or the institution, and what will happen if the situation continues or doesn't continue. And at this point, we don't include any new information in the conclusion, right? So our conclusion, we must describe how the information I collected and explain the situation occurred. For example, I had some interviews, I spoke to people, or I assessed a workplace situation, what it means for the organization or the institution, and what will happen if that same problem reoccurs again, and what will happen if it doesn't happen again. You are clear on that, right? Yes, Mr. Rana said a summary kind of, yeah? It is kind of a summary. We will come to that part now. Okay, so to make recommendations would be the 7th step. When we make recommendations, what do we think the solution to the problem is and what we think should happen next? So if we make a recommendation, we should think about what the solution should be and what should happen next. So to help us decide what to recommend, we need to reread our findings and conclusions. We need to think about what we want. We want the person who asked for the report should do or should not do. What action should they carry out? And then check that our recommendations are practical and are based logically on our conclusions. Nothing illogical and something that makes sense. And that is, of course, actionable, right? And then lastly, to ensure you include enough detail for the reader to know what needs to be done and who should do it, right? So if, for example, I'm going to make a recommendation to the CEO of a company or the president of a company, I need to reread and make sure the findings and reread the findings and conclusions. Okay, when I need to think about what do I want the president of the company to do or not to do, and what action should happen, what they should carry out. So we check our recommendations, if it's practical, if it's going to work in that particular scenario, but also we need to look at, is it going to be feasible or is it going to work for that particular institution or company that we are writing the report about? Or in some cases, a hospital or a traffic department or school, right? Or a research project. And then we ensure we include enough detail for that person to understand and what he needs to know, what to be done and who should do it. So Lastly, our recommendation should be written as a numbered list and ordered from most to least important. As we can see at this point here, report writing is not exactly the prose style of writing. It is factual writing. It is written in order. And of course, we use headings and we number our things, because if we number it, it can be counted how many actions can be done or cannot be done in whatever order we want to do that. Right, so it's mostly factual writing, and our writing has to be concise and to the point, and of course, logical. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right, we will move on. So in step 8, this brings us to step 8, draft the executive summary and table of contents. Some reports require an executive summary. Not all reports require an executive summary. I will show you a sample of a simple report later on, and you will see that we don't require it for everything, but most of the time we are required an executive summary or a list of contents. So even though the two sections come near the beginning of the report, we will not be able to do the executive summary until we have finished it. And we have our structure and our recommendations are finalized. When we have everything in order, we make a note of it, and then we construct our executive summary or our table of or list of contents. So you see how we have to first build the whole structure. And then when we have done that, now we put it in list order 1, 2, 3, and that is it, right? So an executive summary is usually about 100 words long if we're going to write out a paragraph of an executive summary. It tells the reader what the report is about and summarize the recommendations. And that would go back to the front, and then we put everything else. Then we put it into detail. Then the details follow structure, numbers, subheadings, and all of that. Does anyone have an example of an executive summary? For example, just something, anything. You can use the speaker or you can use the chat box. It doesn't have to be 100 words long. If anyone have a kind of what is your report about? If you have to write a report, how will you start your sentence? How will you start off with this report is about? Does anybody have an example of what a report could be about? Not the actual wording, just your idea of what you think the report could be about. Can I have any volunteers, any takers there? Abdurrahman says a report about student progress. Okay, good. That's a good start, a report about student progress. What else can you add there? So the report could summarize what happens with the students, foundation year, final year students, or things were not clear and why they were not clear. What are we going to do about it, and who has to take action in order to solve the issue. Okay, so Abdurrahman says a report about student progress they're performing in exams, projects, lectures, understanding. Very good. Hanan says report about graduations. Good, so yeah, that would be type of reports or samples of what we can do. Student progress, graduations, and so on. And of course, a business plan. Thank you very much. A business plan we have to write what kind of business, what is it going to be about, how we're going to do about it. And of course, we will have to add a business plan in that report as well. A business report is usually required by a bank. If you are going to open a big business and you are going to the bank for a loan, and the bank is going to loan you money to open your business, they need a business plan firstly. They might not require a technical report, but a business plan, for most banks worldwide, it is a requirement. Okay, are you clear on that? If there's anything that you're not sure about, please raise your hand or put on your speaker or type in the chat box and let me know if you are not clear on something. So the executive summary is a summary of the report, and the contents of the summary report includes structure and purpose. So the structure and purpose is listed under 5 points there. The first one is the purpose of the report and the problem that we are addressing. Okay, what's the reason and what is the problem why I'm writing this report? The second one is the larger scope of the project in which the report is being written. By the larger scope, we're talking about something, I'm reporting on an incident, or I'm reporting on something that happened inside this place, and how does it correlate to the company or the institution. Or for example, if I'm writing a report about student progress at King Abdulaziz University, my purpose of the report would be stated, and what's the problem, and then how it affects the university productivity or the university progress as a whole. You're okay with that, right? The third one is an overview of any requirements, methodologies, or analysis used. So what do I require? I require, for student reports, I require student scores. I require exam data. Methodologies, what method am I using? Do I interview students? Do I look at papers? Do I go through teacher reports? And what analysis am I using? The fourth one is a summary of any of the results or the findings, enough to allow the reader to understand the importance. Please be careful not to add jargon, like too many words that people don't understand. Right? Sometimes we look at a report, or sometimes we read something, even if we read term papers, or we read something that we research for research purposes, and we don't get what they are saying, because they are sometimes using hyperluted words, and sometimes there are so much adjectives in one to add to one thing, and then it gets lost. All right, so the aim is to state it concisely, logically, and clearly. And then the fifth one is the summary or conclusions of and recommendations. So the last summary or the conclusions, is better to use the word conclusions there. And what recommendations do we have about whatever we are reporting on? All right, so step 9, we compile a reference list. And the reference list, we have to list all the sources that we refer to in the report. And it uses, of course, APA referencing. So when we use books or magazines or any kind of material from any sources, somebody said something and I'm recording it, that goes in my reference list, right? I will show you at the end of this presentation my reference list, because I must have gotten these information somewhere, right? Some of it. So we list all of the sources that we refer to in the report, and we use the APA referencing. I'll come to that part in a minute. Just a quick overview of APA. What is APA referencing? It is the abbreviation of the American Psychological Association. And the APA referencing is based on the style of academic writing favored by the APA. Why do we reference? Why referencing? When we quote or paraphrase someone else's words or ideas, we have to acknowledge them by giving credit to the source of our information. So, of course, by doing this, we avoid plagiarism. And plagiarism is a big crime. In the literary world, in the academic world, we cannot do that, right? It might get kicked out, right? So plagiarism is important to avoid at all costs. So there are two parts of acknowledging an information source used for the assignment. A citation, the words quoted or paraphrased in your text. We include the author and copyright date of that publication. And of course, the other one is a reference, which appears in the reference list at the end of assignment or at the end of our report. Right, so APA referencing is a system that determines the style and format of referencing, how the references are written. We use the reference list and in-text citation to acknowledge and identify sources. Has anybody done a reference list before? I'm sure you've submitted some papers at some stage, right? And you have compiled the reference list before, many times, yeah? It depends where we are at university. In the university life, that is the integral part of papers of any kind of writing. We have to source our. So APA referencing the American Psychological Association, I think that is favored by King Abdulaziz University. We also use it here. There are other references, referencing. There's the APA, there's the AMA, the American Medical Association, and there's the MLA, the Modern Language Association. But the most commonly used one is the APA, and it's always favored by most universities across the globe. There are universities in other parts of the world that maybe favor the MLA or the MLA or the AMAs, APA and the APA and the AMA. Anyway, the APA is our most common one, and it's updated here. It's now the updated one, version 7, I think it is now. I stand under correction, Rana. Am I correct? It's version 7 now, I think. Yes. By the way, when it comes to referencing and APA and citations and bibliography and all of those nice goodies, Dr. Basim will do, I think he has done it before, but I'm sure he will do it again. A workshop, we will workshop that, especially there's a whole section for that. Am I correct, Dr. Basim? There is a workshop for that somewhere in our series, there must be one. That refers to referencing bibliography, especially with the APA, to get more detail about it.
Yeah, we'll have it on November 16th, inshallah.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay, good. So referencing is important, as we can see there, and we use the APA referencing style. So example of using APA style in a reference list, how do we use it? The example, just to show you how it's done, we use italics. When we use our Word document or whatever document we type on, we change the font to italics for journal titles and volumes and for book titles. So when we're writing a reference list in the APA style 7th edition, we arrange our list alphabetically by author's surname. So the author's surname, of course, must be in alphabetical order. The author list, before and use the last author if there are 2 to 20 authors. All of these things we will go into detail about when we have that kind of workshop or presentation again. Example, Goodfellow I, Benjio Y, Kervel A. We put a comma after the surname. So example, we will write Al-Amri, comma, Basim, doctor, right? And then surname, initials, and then the year. And the book title in italics, we transfer title, translated titles if we have one, if we can find one. And lastly, the publisher. We also have a DOI, Digital Object Identifier. The DOI takes us directly to the link. As you can see in the sample here on the slide, HTTP. That's not a real thing, it's just something I typed in there. It will take you directly to the information page for that particular article. If you are referring to anything, you can put it in there like a digital object identifier as known as a DOI. At the bottom here, we can see how it's done, laid out, surname, initial, Cream, P, and Lee. These are two authors, and Lee, MR, 2003. The title, Writing at University, second edition, and the publisher, Open University Press, or Cambridge, or Oxford, or Pearson, right? So that would be how we use it. This is an example of how we can use the APA referencing style. It is the most, it's the best one to use actually. I've tried myself to use the others at different universities, but this one seems to be the one that's most logical for me. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's good to know how it's used. Has anyone had any problems with referencing? Has any one of you had any problems with structure or? No, not really, right? As long as we just have our details. I remember when I was at university 100 years ago, when I was a student, my first term paper that I had to write, and I got all the references and I put everything in the wrong order. I had the author's names by the first name first and then the surname second, so the alphabetical order was out. Can you imagine the disaster? The professor just called me in and he threw the paper back at me. But that's always the hard way to learn, right? In those days, we actually didn't have a writing center. So you guys are lucky. You have a writing center that you can come back to or come for help at any time, right? All right. So that's our example of using APA style in a reference list. And the last step, step 10, to revise your draft report. Important, revise it. Whatever you do, whatever you write, if you write a paragraph in a test, if you write an assignment or anything, revise it. Look at it again and again. It's always important to revise the work. Abdurrahman, you want me to repeat the form? Which form you're talking about? The previous slide? I'm not clear about your question. Oh, the previous slide. Let's just look at it. What is it that you need to know there? Oh, how many authors, yeah? This one that I've got here at the bottom, there are two authors here. So Cream P and Lee MR. Their surnames come first and the initial. We don't use the first name of the author. Some books and periodicals and journals have the first name written on them, but we don't use, they only use the initial, right? Is that clear? Does that answer your question, or you not, or did you need me to tell you something else? Oh, the shape of the reference, yeah. The actual order that you write it. It usually will go on one line. Sometimes it will take over another, it will cross over to the next line. But if you type it out, and it will usually go on a Word document in one line like this. On the slide, there's no space because the slide is very limited. And of course, when you use a handwriting, You can either write big or small. That's a different story. But it's more professional to type it out or to print it straight from the computer. So when we have 2 or more, or we have 20 authors, we sometimes have books or journals or publications that's got many authors. We will look at all of those things when we do the APA referencing style workshop. We will look at all those details. You okay there with that? Yeah, it sometimes goes over 2 lines because the title of the book could be very long. The title can be very long, and sometimes there are many authors, and sometimes there's more than one publisher. Akram is asking what is the general format to write the references. Is that your question? The general format? Can you see the bottom line here on the slide? The surname, the initial, and the year, and then the book's title in italics, and then the publisher at the end. So the general format for this is always surname, initial, year in brackets, 1995, 2003, the title of the book in italics, preferably in bold, and of course, the publisher's name or the publishing house name. Okay. Does that answer your question, Akram? Okay, good. Okay, we have step 10 to revise the draft report. It's always important to revise any written work that we do. The things that we need to check, it should include the assignment question and the instructions or guidelines. And we have to make sure that the required sections are included. And of course, it must be in the correct order. Our information has to be accurate with no gaps. Don't leave out anything, okay? If you are going to write something that you have no concrete evidence with it, just leave it out there. And of course, make sure if our argument is logical. Does the information we present support the conclusion and the recommendations? We have to make sure about that. All right, it must be logical and it must support the conclusion and the recommendations. All the terms, the symbols, the abbreviations used, it has been explained. So if I use an abbreviation in my report, put in brackets the full wording of it, right? At least explain what it means or what is it about. Okay, and then of course we make sure that the formatting is correct, our numbering, our headings, it is consistent throughout the report. So let's make sure that we put in correct order, number 1, number 2, number 3. If we have subheadings, we will use 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then we'll go to the next one, number 2, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so on. It depends on how you want to structure your report. And of course, make sure lastly, that the report reads well and the writing is as clear and effective as possible. Okay, the writing must be clear. Don't use abstract nouns and unnecessary adjectives or flowery language. We'll come to that in a minute. So the sections of a simple report is introduction, methodology, findings or results, discussion, conclusions, and references. Right? This is just a simple report, a very basic one. We state in the introduction what the research or project inquiry is about. In our methodology, we state how we did the research or the inquiry and what methods have I used. And then the findings or the results, we give the results of the research. Discussion is we interpret. We interpret your findings and say what you think or what can be done and so on. Conclusion and recommendations at the end. And then last but not least, the references. So the simple structure is introduction, methodology, findings or results, discussion, conclusions, and references. Okay, let's quickly recap. Your turn now. Can we just recap quickly? Let's see if we are clear on what we need to do in a report. We have 4 words in the block there: subheading, information, recommend, and aim. So let's see. Where can we fill it in number 1, 2, 3, 4? It's very easy. I thought I'll just add something in there. I don't want to offend you by something so easy. You might think he thinks that we are not intelligent enough. So yeah. So number 1, we might be asked to write a report when a person in authority needs. Now we know that. We need information. Thank you, Azza. We need information. Number 2, in the first line of the introduction, you should always say that what the aim of the report is. Thank you, Hope. The aim of the report. And number 3, a report should be divided into paragraphs, each with a clear subheading on the left. Very good, Rana, thank you. And number 4, you gave the answer for that one as well. Recommend. So at the end of the report, we will probably be asked to recommend what should be done. All right, so we've got that. We now understand it, and I'm happy with that. So when we use a formal writing style, always use a formal writing style. The style of the report should be concise, giving precise detail. Flowery language should not be used. Right? What do we mean by flowery language? Use too much adjectives like, for example, you are not going to say, my dearest Mr. Manager, right? You are just going to use technical language, straightforward to the point, not emotional language. So flowery language. An example of flowery language, can anybody give an example of flowery language? For example, if we talk about schools or children that's learning at schools, somebody wrote something. Yeah, my dear is not. My great school, just use my school. And talking about schools, an example of a flowery language is, it is of utmost importance for the coordination of higher education and institutions of learning to be equipped with the proper learning material or learning equipment. We understand that, right? We understand it, but that's kind of flowery. What we're actually saying is schools should be well equipped for children to learn better. That's it. I'm just using something that came off the top of my head, just an example of a flowery language, right? So sometimes we read stuff and we read things like a long description of something, and then what the person wants to say is that, I understand the report. Another example is what can I use now? Let's use this workshop, for example. The 10 steps of report writing, right? The most comprehensive and illustrated 10 steps of report writing was displayed today in the presentation for the students' clear comprehension and perusal. Right. What we want to say is the 10 steps or the report writing presentation was clear for the students. Do you understand what I'm saying about flowery language, right? The next one is data may be presented as charts, graphs, or tables if appropriate, if there is a need for that. Yes. Yes, Sumaira says, hello, sunshine. Yeah, well, definitely not to be used not even in reports only, but for any business email. It's if it's your close friend or very personal thing that you're going to write, then you will say hello, sunshine, right? But you are not going to do it to a colleague at work or anywhere in the workplace. It is not. We will do all of those nice little things in all our business writing and our business technical writing things that we're going to do in this series. What to avoid and what is allowed. And of course, description of methodology should be sufficiently clear and detailed. As long as it is clear and detailed. Sometimes you need a lot of detail to describe something, your methodology, what you did, how you went about it. But as long as it's clear, logical, concise language. So that's how we use formal writing, our formal writing style in reports. Any questions about that? Are you okay with that? You're all clear there? Okay, let's wrap this up now. Okay, so here's a sample. A sample report. I'm sorry, but I couldn't fit this in on one slide. So I had to use 3 or 4 slides, but we'll go through it quickly. It doesn't fit on the slide. As I said, PowerPoint has a lot of limitations. But anyway, be that as it may, this is a very simple, basic sample of a report. And this report goes to Ahmed Farsi, Company Safety Officer, and the company's name the report was written by Sami Kardawi, personal assistant, copy the company. It's just something that's made up, okay? So the report to and from and the date, 7th of October 2020, the receiver, the sender. If you can see on the right side, it gives you the details, the receiver, the sender, and the date. And the subject heading would be the report on safety hazards in the main office of Kabida Company. And then we number it. Number 1, purpose. Number 2, procedure. So purpose, reference of original instruction, who, what, and where. Okay, so the wording that I can use is you ask me to prepare a report, your memo dated 4th of July, that is referring to the memo, on actual and potential hazards in our main office. I was asked to present my findings by the 22nd of July. Secondly, procedure. I inspected. Now under procedure, we have number 2, and then we subheaded with 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. What was done to investigate the topic, and we number it in steps of procedure. I inspected the office, I discussed hazards with staff, and I examined previous reports of the topic, and then you will write the C references. So in the reference section, we look at that. Then number 3, the findings, right? So the findings, we have 3 subheadings: electrical hazard, furnishing hazards, other hazards. So we look at what information was discovered. We number the subheadings of the items. And electrical hazard, there was some electrical problem in the office, the starter and so on, the main power input, it was worn out, and filing cabinet in the way, worn area. Okay, furnishing hazards, filing cabinets 20 years old. And this happens in any office, anywhere in the world, right? So we look at subheadings tabulated within these, for example, 3, 3.1, 3.2, and then there are 3 subheadings in this. For this particular one, you might have more, you might have less. Electrical, furnishing, other hazards, the carpet in front of the letter rack has become worn, small tear, and people can fall over it. So there's an accident that happened with a worker there, and the report is filed. And as we can see there in the reference, we will look at that. So these are findings, right? And then conclusion, number 4, and number 5, recommendations. Electrical hazards 4.1, furnishing hazards 4.2, and so on. What the information suggests to the writer is important. A well-organized list, it summarizes the information, and it is written objectively and unemotionally, right? Somebody got hurt. You write objectively, not emotionally. Even if it is your brother or your sister in the workplace, you have to use unemotional language, right? You can go home and be emotional about it again later on. Recommendations, what do we recommend? And there we have number 5, 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. Rectify, investigate, replace. So you give clear, concise, precise, suggested actions, right? You use words like rectify, investigate, replace. And then the last one is references. In this case, this is a very simple, basic report. As you can see, there is no executive summary here, but this is just to show you the order of the report. Smith, J, electrical safety hazards at the company, Carbido Holdings, the safety report. So you just have 2 there. Sometimes you don't need a lot of references. You refer back to the files within the company. You go to HR, you go to health and safety department, you go to legal department in any company or institution. We have many different divisions, and you can get information from there. And then appendix, the last one. This is the accident report that we couldn't put into the main one. So this is additional information here. Additional, and it is relevant. You're not going to put additional information that's not relevant to the report. It has to be part of it. It must be relevant to whatever you are reporting on. Staff accident report, the number, the date, and the company's name, time and date of accident, staff member involved. Again, list the name, surname, Adam, initial M. Details of the injury, twisted ankle. How did the accident occur? Tripped over frayed carpet. Where did it occur? In front, in the main office. Treatment given, and of course you give details. And your signature at the bottom. Can you all see this clearly? All right. Rana wrote something, limitation. Are you referring to anything specific? What do you mean by limitation? Okay, she says I must ignore it. It's hard to ignore something if it's in front of you. All right. So that is the simple structure, the very basic structure of the report, right? So now let's match it up and see if we can see. We have 4 phrases in the block. They summarize what we have found out, conclude by giving you recommendations, say why you are writing the report, and say how you got the information. Okay. Just to at the end, there's number 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is not a continuation of the sentence. It is just almost like in the synonym form, another wording for the same thing. So number 1 is the aim of this report is. What would that be? The aim of this report, what would it be? Summarize, conclude, say why we are writing, say how you got your information. Yes, of course. Number 1, the aim of this report is say why we are writing the report. Number 2, it is based on a survey of, it is based on whatever words you want to use. It is based on a meeting. It is based on interviews, right? What would that be? we say how we got the information. Thank you, Azza. How you get the info, yeah? And number 3 is the majority or the minority of, we summarize. Thank you, Badur. We summarize what we have found out. And the last one, I would recommend that we, or you can use perhaps we should, and that is recommendation, right? Conclude by giving your recommendation. So we conclude by giving recommendations. Our first thing that we must remember in the report is to say why we are writing the report. The aim of this report is, and that means why we are writing it. It is based on a survey. Say how we got the information. The majority or the minority of whatever, we summarize what we have found out. And then last but not least, the last one, concluding one, is we would recommend, or perhaps we should consider, and that is conclude by giving recommendations. Right. All right, that brings us to the last note that we want to remember for this report writing workshop, is to note the different types of report have slightly different structure. It's not all going to be, it's not written in stone that it must be in that order. Sometimes we're going to make a difference in design. Okay, so the structure might not be exactly the same for all reports. Different structures may combine the sections or break them down using additional subheadings. Okay, so it depends on what structures we are using. And different headings we may use for the same content. For example, we can use the word method instead of procedure, right? Institutions and companies usually have templates. They usually have policies and procedures in place where you have to follow that order of wording or those forms that you have to fill in. And when you write your own report, it depends on the policies and procedures of that company or that institution or that hospital or that department, wherever in the world it might be, or whatever in the world it might be for. And of course, important lastly to note that your learning material or online course page may contain specific requirements. It may require guidelines or instructions on structuring your assignment, right? So whatever you have as a grad or post-grad paper or a term paper or a research project or report writing for any faculty here at university, it is important to look at your course page, and the course page would give you specific requirements and guidelines and instructions for your assignment, right? So when you get an assignment, it's usually quite clear, right? And we know what to do when we are given an assignment or an exam. It's quite clear and we can see what they want. It is very easy sometimes, and sometimes it happens that we can misinterpret the requirements or we misinterpret the whole thing and we can go in the wrong direction. We must be careful not to do that. But in order to avoid that, you have a writing center to come to where you can be given help and assistance for that. So in conclusion, finally, written communication has many forms and uses. Effective note-taking is vital to create a factual report. If you don't make notes of what you want to write, it's not only for report writing. What about an essay? What about a research project or a term paper? You're going to make notes. You're going to write something down on a piece of paper, right? You're not going to start and just start writing. So note-taking, when you get information somewhere, it's important. There's a section of note-taking. It's a kind of a, we can include it somewhere at some stage somewhere as a lesson in a lesson form or a workshop form, but note-taking is very helpful, right? To have the note-taking skills I'm talking about. Effective report writing lends credibility to any investigation. So if the report is effective and clear, it gives more credibility to any kind of investigation, right? And lastly, the correct application of grammar is important. We want to convey the correct information in the report, one word out, in grammatically out, and sometimes it happens a lot. It can give uh, the report an incorrect direction. So it is important to convey the correct information by using the correct wording and the correct grammar. That's very important. Any questions so far? Are you all good there? Yes, this is recorded. I think it will be posted online. And I think everybody will get access to the slides. Right, the references that we use for this presentation, the references that are used for this workshop are listed here on this slide. Management House, Business Communication, Writing Style, a Guide to Good English, Dissertation Skills for Business and Management Students, and Digital Information, managers.org.uk and plainenglish.co.uk. These are just some of the references that we used to do this presentation. All right, that's it from my side. I would like to thank you all for your attention, for your cooperation, and I wish you all the best. If there's anything that you need with any technical writing, please come to the Writing Center, and it will be good to register for the technical series. From today onwards, we start off. This was our first workshop in a technical series. Any questions or any concerns that anybody have?
All right, so thank you, Mr. Ridwaan, for this wonderful and informative workshop. It covers almost the main elements of writing reports. So thank you again, and thank you all for attending this wonderful workshop. So I just shared with you two links. The first one is the evaluation form. Please evaluate today's workshop. And the other link is the YouTube channel. You can subscribe, and inshallah tonight or within 24 hours, we will upload this workshop, inshallah, to the YouTube channel. So if you have any questions or comments, please open your mic or post it in the chat here. We still have about 15 minutes if you have any questions. Yes, thank you, Mr. Kamal. Next workshop, inshallah, is going to be this Wednesday, which is going to be about law writing. So I hope to see you all. We'll share the links, inshallah, tomorrow within 24 hours before the workshop. Okay, I think there is no comment or any questions. So thank you, Mr. Ridwaan, and thank you all for attending today's workshop, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.